There are pains in marriage that cannot be put into words. They are not quarrels. They are not tears falling in front of each other, but they are silence, a coldness so chilling. It is when you look at the one who once said they would stay with you for life, yet now their gaze passes through you as if you never existed. There are nights lying beside the one you love while your heart feels so empty that it becomes numb. There are moments when you scream silently, "Why has it become like this?" But in return there is only endless space, cold as stone. These are wounds that do not bleed, but seep out little by little, smoldering in the heart like a verdict for which you do not know what mistake you committed. Many people think that suffering like that is because the affinity has ended, but the Buddha teaches there are pains in marriage, not as punishment, but as a doorway leading to light. We often want to escape those sufferings, but the more we escape, the more we are led back. And only those who are strong enough to walk through all those pains can cleanse the karma, can touch the deepest layer of blessings in this relationship that seems to have been exhausted. In this video, you will walk through 5 pains that no one wants to face. But perhaps you are right now in one of them, and perhaps, if you do not let go too quickly, you will find the doorway that until now you always thought was the end. Have you ever asked yourself, why does the love that you nurtured with all your sincerity in the end turn into a long journey of endurance? Why is the one who once made you so happy that you cried tears of joy also the one who makes you hurt until you are drained? The days of love now are only long nights of restlessness, the times collapsing alone in a house still lit but where the heart's flame has gone out. You do not understand why. You try to change. You endure. You sacrifice. But the more you endure, the more you hurt. The more you try, the more you despair. And then you begin to ask yourself, is it that I married the wrong person? Is it that this marriage is a mistake? But if you have ever read the Buddha's teachings, you will see no one enters our life by accident. The one who makes you fall into suffering sometimes is not an enemy, but a hidden benefactor, because karma is something you cannot escape. But if you are brave enough to walk through it, you will wash away the bonds that have been rooted in your soul from many past lives. The Buddha teaches, people come together not only because of feelings, but also because of karmic force. Some come to be happy with us. Some come to cleanse karma with us. And some come not to love, but to teach us how to love ourselves again when we are wounded. Marriage is not only love. Marriage is a Dharma hall. There, every suffering is a lesson. Every anger is a chance for contemplation. Every moment of wanting to let go is a test to see whether our mind has ripened or not. We often think suffering is caused by the other person, but according to the Dharma, suffering is the resonance of 2 energies not yet healed. One is wounded and does not know how to love. One is wounded and does not know how to love themselves. When those 2 meet, they think they are saving each other, but in fact they are triggering the deepest wounds in each other. That is not a mistake. That is an opportunity. An opportunity to see clearly what in our heart is pulling us toward that kind of person, what in our heart makes us endure, makes us unable to let go, makes us both love and hate. Every time we blame the other person, it is a time our heart wants to avoid responsibility. But if we are mindful enough, we will see. Pain in marriage is not a punishment, but a bell of awakening. It calls us back to listen to ourselves. Some people ask, if marriage is so painful, why not just divorce? But is it that everyone can easily walk away? There are relationships that, though painful, we still cannot leave. There are relationships that seem to have ended, but the heart still circles around, unable to escape. Why is that? Because karma is not yet finished, because the soul has not yet learned the lesson, and because within us still remain resentment, anger, attachment. The Buddha teaches, letting go is not abandoning the other person, but letting go of resentment in yourself. Only when your heart is truly peaceful, with no more anger, no more blame, no more expecting the other to be different, then whether you stay or you leave, both are choices of wisdom, no longer reactions of hurt. Look a little deeper. Very possibly, the pain in marriage that you are enduring is actually hidden blessings, because if not for those breakdowns, you would not have learned to return to yourself. If not for that silence, you would never know. Love cannot come from another, but must arise from within. If the other person were always gentle, always indulging, always understanding, would you ever learn how to stand firm by your own inner strength? If the other person never betrayed, never left, would you ever see how much you had lost yourself? Blessings do not always come in the form of peace. Some blessings come like storms, to sweep away the old, to force you to grow, to make your soul shed its old skin. And marriage is precisely where those storms most easily arise, because there you live most truly, you hope most deeply, you expect the most, and also because of that, you are most easily disappointed, most easily hurt. But the Buddha never taught us to run away from suffering. He only taught, look deeply into it, and learn how to transform from within. Therefore, if you are in a marriage where each day feels weary, please do not quickly think that you are unfortunate, but try to quiet your heart a little. Look at the other person as a mirror. What are they reflecting in you? What lesson are they teaching you? What in the past are they helping you to cleanse? Perhaps they are carrying part of the karma on your behalf. Perhaps their thorny presence is actually an invitation for you to step into the journey of awakening. In the next part, you will go deep into 5 pains that the Buddha calls thresholds of karma transformation in marriage. And they are pains no one wants, but most couples with deep karmic affinity, great blessings, will have to pass through. And if you are in one of those pains, do not turn away too quickly, because perhaps you are not enduring someone, but you are gradually paying a debt. And if it is paid, you will not only have a happy marriage, but also a soul shining brighter than any blessing. The first pain, coldness like strangers. There is a pain in marriage that has no sound, does not break out in tears, not noisy like quarrels. It is gentle like a still wind, but silently withdraws bit by bit of warmth in the heart. It is when the one you once called husband, wife, suddenly becomes a stranger like a lodger in your very own house. Both still eat the same meals, still sleep in the same bed, still live as people under one roof, but strangely, the hearts have gone in 2 directions long ago. Not even a glance is given to each other. Even a greeting has become luxurious. Even a casual touch of the hand makes the other withdraw. Even the presence of each other gradually becomes heavier than absence. She said, for 3 years he has no longer looked at her as before, no longer asks, "Are you tired today?" No longer says, "Good night," no longer hugs her when coming home late from work. All that remains is suffocating silence. There were times she wanted to ask him, "Why have we become like this?" But then, seeing his soulless eyes pass over her, she no longer had the courage. The worst is not anger, not quarrels, but coldness without a bit of life, like a flower wilted but refusing to fall. Every day living together, she feels like her soul is forgotten. No longer a wife, no longer a companion, but like a shadow walking beside a body no longer connected. Many people have gone through this feeling. It is the most terrible pain, yet the hardest to name. Because if they cheat, you have reason to leave. If they abuse, you have reason to rise up. But when they do nothing, simply no longer love, no longer interested, no longer have life in their eyes for you, you do not know what to call it. Is it end of affinity? Is it karma? Is it fate? Or is it only a silent exhaustion in a marriage too weary? According to the Dharma, coldness is not a sign of affinity ending, but a sign of a layer of karma arising to be seen. In every heart, there are layers of wounds unhealed from the past, both in this life and many past lives. When two people meet, the initial affinity connects with love, but when karma arises, the relationship begins to erode. The loving words of old gradually disappear. The care of before now seems redundant, not because there is no more feeling, but because the karma between two people begins to push out the shadows. Coldness is when the soul wants to rest. It is when the inner consciousness of both begins to tire because it has run too long after the expectation that the other must make me happy. And it is when you need to look back. How much expectation did you have in your love? How long have you lived in marriage with the belief that the other must listen to me, must care for me, must make me feel loved? But when the other no longer does that, do you dare to look back at yourself? The Buddha teaches, the one who suffers is the one who always expects something from others. When you begin living in a marriage where care no longer comes from the partner, that is exactly the moment you must learn the lesson of loving yourself deeper than ever. Do not use their coldness to conclude that you have no more value. Do not let their silence make you forget your own heart's voice. Because sometimes, exactly when being forgotten is when you are given the chance to return to connect with your soul. Some ask, so must I continue living with a cold person forever? The answer is no. But before deciding to stay or to leave, do one thing more important. Warm yourself again. The other may have cooled, but do not extinguish the fire in your heart. The other may no longer speak words of love, but you can still speak gentle words to yourself. The other may have withdrawn his gaze, but you still have your own eyes to look back at the journey you have walked. There is a paradox. The Dharma often says, the one who makes us hurt the most is often the one with the deepest karma with us. They come not to make you happy, but to force you to grow from within pain. Their coldness is not punishment, but an invitation to return to yourself. Because when you are still living for them, you are forgetting whose life this is. When you are still living in emotional dependence, you are entrusting happiness into a shadow, always changing, she said. After nearly a year living in her husband's silence, she decided no longer to ask, "What is wrong with you?" Instead, she woke earlier to walk alone in the park. She began to learn to cook for herself with the care, as if for a guest of honor. She bought a flower pot and watered it each morning, as if watering back life to herself. She no longer tried to change him. She no longer waited for a hug. She no longer hoped for a word of care. And strangely, exactly when she warmed herself again, his gaze began to change. No longer indifferent, no longer avoiding. As if in her life force, he found something he had also lost in himself. The Buddha teaches, to change karma, change the mind. Coldness can only be dissolved not by demanding love from the other, but by repairing the heart that has become cold to itself. When you live again with compassion, live again with mindful breathing, live again with the simple things each day, that energy will naturally spread, and sometimes the other will touch again the light they had forgotten. Love does not die because affinity ends. Love only dies when both forget the reason they once stayed. And if only one person still keeps the light, still keeps sincerity, that light is still enough to illuminate a path. But if you have already tried wholeheartedly, have loved fully, have returned to yourself but still cannot warm a soul that has cooled, then at that time, let go as one who has walked the path fully, not as one who gave up halfway. Coldness, like strangers, is not the end. It is a comma for a pause, so both can look back. It is a bell for you to ask yourself, are you loving or depending? Are you accompanying or sacrificing? Are you living in marriage or just existing in a shell named husband and wife? And if you are brave enough to answer those questions, you will see, even the coldest pain is also a teacher, teaching you the lesson of loving yourself again. The second pain, no matter how much you try, it is never recognized. There is a kind of suffering in marriage even more bitter than betrayal, and that is when you have tried your utmost, yet are still not recognized. You do everything. You sacrifice. You take care. You endure. You live for the other, for the children, for the family, but in the end, you are still the one being blamed. You are still the one being misunderstood. You are still the shadow standing behind all that should have been cherished. You cook a hot meal, they do not say thank you. You swallow down one word of argument, they see it as natural. You care for them when they are sick, they only say, well, you are my wife anyway. You carry all the weariness of the family, but when you are sad, no one is sad with you. She told, she once was the woman who lived wholeheartedly for her husband. When they got married, he was only a mechanic working for hire. She saved sparingly, gathered, borrowed so he could open his own workshop. In the early days when he had no clients, she still trusted, still encouraged, still worked as a laborer while caring for a young child. 10 years passed. He gradually had wealth, had a voice in the trade, but she was still the woman standing behind the door, silently caring for each meal, each pill, each word to their child, until one day she simply said gently to him, "Today I am tired. Could you pick up the child for me?" And he snapped, "Such a small thing you can't handle, always at home and still complain tired." She stood still, not because she was angry, but because at that moment she understood. 10 years of wholeheartedness of hers had never been seen. That pain is not easy to put into words. It is not noisy like jealousy. It is not piercing like betrayal. But it is exhausting and unending. It makes you doubt. Perhaps true love does not exist. Or perhaps people only cherish when you are no longer there. According to the Buddha's teaching, the pains of not being recognized are not because you are of low value, but because you are learning the lesson of letting go of the self that wants to be recognized. It sounds paradoxical, but in truth, in every person there is a deep longing. I do this because I hope someone will see, will understand, will be grateful. And exactly that expectation, if unmet, becomes a deep emotional pit, making us resentful, sorrowful, and doubting ourselves. The Buddha does not teach us to act to be praised. He teaches, act like a ray of sunshine, shining without needing anyone to praise. Act like a stream of water, flowing without needing anyone to thank. When you act out of compassion, out of unconditional love, then whether the other sees or not, no longer makes you hurt. But that does not mean you must endure. It does not mean you must live in injustice. Rather, you need to transform from acting to be recognized into acting to nourish yourself. You may still cook meals, but cook with love, not out of habit. You may still care, but care with joy, not with waiting for response. You may still stay, but stay as one who is mindful, not as one who clings to the role of the sacrificer. Look closely again. Is it that you are repeating an old pattern from childhood? When young, you did well to be praised by parents. Growing up, you did well to be recognized by friends. When in love, you were good, so the other would not leave you. When married, you continued to sacrifice to keep someone satisfied. But how often do you ask yourself, am I doing this because I truly want to, or because I am afraid of losing? That is the trap of karma, the deep operation of nameless attachments. And if you do not stop, you will continue to live your whole life, chasing recognition, losing yourself in every role. The Buddha teaches, no one gives you value except your own mind. When you see yourself, you no longer need anyone to see you. When you love yourself, you no longer need anyone's recognition. When you act rightly with a clear mind, then even if the other is indifferent, you will not be hurt as before, because hurt can only touch you when you are still longing for someone to prove you are worthy. Some say, to be wife, mother, daughter-in-law, and not be recognized, then what is the point of living? But you may try asking instead, so, if I need no recognition but can still live radiantly, then am I not freeing myself from countless invisible chains? She said, after being snapped at by her husband for that seemingly harmless sentence. She did not argue, did not cry. She only quietly sat with herself and asked, in these 10 years, what did I really need? Was it love? Was it gratitude? Or had I lost myself long ago? From that day, she began writing a diary every night, not for anyone to read, but for herself to listen to herself. She began meditating 10 minutes every morning, not for something lofty, but to touch her own breath. She began planting a few small vegetable beds behind the house, not to save money, but to nurture the inner soil that was barren. And from then on, she no longer lived to please anyone. She still cooked, still cleaned, still cared, but no longer waited for praise, no longer hurt by a cold gaze, no longer desperate for not being seen. She lived like a small lamp, lighting herself and peaceful enough to not need anyone to prove it. The Buddha teaches, when you no longer need anyone to see you, you will see everything. Liberation does not come from others changing. It comes from the moment you no longer wish others to understand your pain. Then, you will stop drifting with karma and begin living with a clear mind. In the end, what you need is not someone who recognizes all your sacrifices, but a heart healed enough to not need sacrifice to feel valuable. When you act out of love, out of clarity, out of compassion, then every action becomes a prayer, every silence becomes a flower, and if the other cannot see you, then you still see yourself enough. That is the deepest freedom in love. The third pain, always having to forgive. But no change ever comes. There are wounds in marriage that do not come from a single betrayal, but from the repetition of a behavior you once forgave. A careless word, a selfish habit, an unreasonable anger, a neglect, or even a major fracture you once overlooked. Because of love, you did not make it big. Because of care, you swallowed it inside. Because of trust, you gave them another chance. But then, everything returned to the same place, the same mistake, the same wound. Only your heart grew older each time, emptier each time, and more calloused than yesterday. She said, he once betrayed her 5 years ago. She knew pain, collapse, devastation, but he knelt down begging forgiveness, saying it was only a moment of mistake, a meaningless infatuation. He promised he would never repeat it. For the children, for the husband, she forgave. She thought family was worth more than pride. But after a year, she again found him texting another woman. Not to the level of adultery, but enough to kill another piece of trust. He apologized again, swore again, cried again, and she forgave again. 3 times, 4 times, until she no longer felt anything. No pain, no anger, only emptiness. Because each time of forgiveness was a time her soul was turned over, then patched with ever thinner patches, until there was nothing left to patch. The pain does not lie in the mistake itself. It lies in the fact that the mistake never truly stopped. Forgiveness became a habit, and the other person assumed by default you would always be there, always tolerant, always suppressing without leaving. Your tolerance gradually became the reason for them not to change, even became the reason for them to continue hurting you, without even seeing themselves wrong anymore. The Buddha teaches, forgiveness is to liberate yourself, not to let others continue to hurt you. And perhaps you need to pause a little and ask yourself, am I forgiving out of compassion or forgiving out of weakness, fear, and attachment to the form of family? Because if forgiveness arises from compassion, it will lead to healing. But if forgiveness is because you do not dare to lose, then you are only nourishing bad karma to continue in your life. Forgiveness is not overlooking. Forgiveness is looking straight at the pain, understanding why it happened, and from there choosing a wise enough action so you will not be hurt the same way again. Forgiveness is to cut off the cycle of suffering, not to continue being trapped in it. Forgiveness is to free resentment, not to prolong affliction through endurance. The Buddha never taught the good person to become the one who suffers. He teaches, the one who knows love is the one who knows how to set a clear boundary between compassion and foolishness. Some think forgiveness is holiness, but in truth, forgiveness also needs wisdom. Forgiveness is not forgetting. Forgiveness is knowing clearly what happened, but not letting it control your heart anymore. You do not forget, you do not deny, you do not lie to yourself, but you no longer let your heart bleed again for something old. The one who makes you forgive continuously is not necessarily a bad person, but they may be someone living with an ego stronger than awareness. And if you are not wise enough to see that, you will become the one who bears all consequences of their lack of self-cultivation. You will be drained by the very love you gave. In a relationship where only one person changes, forgiveness becomes a burden. True forgiveness only has meaning when the other also knows how to correct themselves, when they truly bow their head, when they show remorse with action, not only with tears, when they return to the right path, out of respect not only for you, but also for their own value. Without that, your forgiveness is only a lotus blooming in the mud without sunlight. It will wither, it will rot, and in the end, you will be the one to perish. The Buddha teaches, letting go at the right time is a kind of wisdom. How many times of forgiveness are enough? That question no one can answer for you. But you can ask yourself, this time of forgiveness, does it lead to transformation or only to repetition? If the answer is repetition, then you are no longer forgiving. You are binding yourself into a new karma. She said, the last time she discovered her husband texting an ex, she did not cry, nor was she angry. She only looked at him for a long time, then said, I forgive you, but no longer to keep you. It is so I can let go, with no more resentment. And that time she left, carrying no luggage, only carrying the serenity of one who has gone through all the pains that love can bring. Many dare not leave, because they think that would be selfish. But the Buddha never taught that. To be called compassionate, you must keep a relationship in which your soul is dying day by day. He only said, a compassionate heart is a heart that knows pain, but does not trade away its own light. If you are forgiving the same thing too many times, stop, not to punish anyone, but to ask, why am I accepting to live forever in this hurt? Step back, not to abandon, but to see the whole picture, to see that forgiveness is a grace, not a duty. And if the other does not cherish that grace, then your departure is also the greatest wake-up call they will ever receive. You may still love that person, still wish them peace, still hope one day they will awaken, but you do not need to accompany them on a path you already know is wrong, because love is not keeping someone at all costs. It is keeping the light in your heart, so you can continue living a life without dependence, without bondage, without trading yourself away. The fourth pain, carrying everything alone in marriage. There is a kind of pain in marriage, not as clear-cut as betrayal, not as piercing as separation, but as lingering as a deep scratch in the heart. It is the feeling that you are carrying everything alone. No one pushes you down, yet you still feel yourself collapsing day by day. No one scolds you for being weak, yet you still feel tears waiting every nightfall. No one says directly that they do not need you, yet the silence, the indifference, the neglect is the clearest affirmation that you are the only one holding this home with all that remains of faith and strength. She said her husband worked freelance. Each month his income was unstable, yet he never cared for meals at home or the children's school fees. Earning money, she handled. Teaching children, she carried. Dealing with relatives, she managed. Managing outside matters, she undertook. Everything was by her hand, while he only lingered with personal pleasures. Each time she was tired, he said, "Women's stuff, and you still complain." Each time she cried, he mocked, "So weak like this. Who could live with you?" She did not resist, nor did she give up. She only pressed everything inside, living like a machine that knows how to love, knows how to endure, knows how to clean, knows how to smile though the heart is empty. Sometimes she felt like she was not a wife, but a servant paid with neglect. The Buddha teaches, a woman is not born to endure, but to open the heart of compassion. But compassion does not mean voluntarily carrying the whole world until collapsing in silence. Compassion does not mean sacrificing to the point of losing yourself. If you are carrying everything, ask yourself, why do you believe only you are strong enough to keep this family? One of the deepest roots of suffering in marriage is the false belief that, if I let go, everything will fall apart. And because of that belief, you take on all responsibility, you shoulder all weariness, you endure in silence, so the other does not need to change. But do you know, overcarrying does not make you respected. It only makes you seen as taken for granted. People often do not cherish what they did not help create. When you do too much, you unintentionally take away the chance for the other to learn to share. When you carry everything, you unintentionally make them believe you were born to endure it. And gradually, you become the one who voluntarily sacrifices, with no one seeing your pain anymore. The Buddha teaches, the suffering does not lie in carrying, but in not seeing the limit where you must put it down. Letting go is not letting go of love. Letting go is setting down what is not yours to hold, so the other has the chance to grow. Letting go is pausing to ask, is it really true I must do everything, or am I just wanting to keep the role of hero in this marriage? She said, once she was gravely ill, unable to rise. For the first time, he had to cook. For the first time, he took the child to school. For the first time, he really saw how hard her every day was. And from that day, he began to share some housework. But sadly, only until she collapsed did he see what was always there. That is the consequence of one person always carrying, while the other always relying. Carrying is not strength. Carrying is a silent compromise between love and fear. Love, so you do not want to let go. Fear, so you do not dare to speak. But the more you carry, the further you drift from yourself. You no longer have laughter, no longer have life in your eyes. You gradually lose the softness, gentleness, femininity that marriage should have nurtured. And worst of all, you begin to doubt your own value, because no one sees, no one recognizes, no one shares. The Buddha does not teach us to carry to preserve. He teaches us to know when to stop in order to preserve mindfulness in the heart. If you are the only one carrying this whole marriage, be brave to speak. Not to demand, but to awaken. Not to vent anger, but to give the other the chance to step out of their comfort zone. Because a healthy relationship does not come from one person doing everything, but from two people tending together. No one can be happy long when one builds, one destroys. When one tries, one is indifferent. When one loves with all their heart, while the other lives as if nothing matters. She said, after she recovered, she no longer did everything as before. She told her husband clearly, I do not need you to change in one day, but if you still love me, start by sharing even the smallest things. He agreed, not easily, but at least she was no longer alone on the journey of keeping the marriage. Because what a woman needs is not pampering, but companionship, understanding, standing beside someone who knows empathy, not behind someone who only neglects. You may do many things, but do not do everything. You may love deeply, but do not love to the point of trading away your soul. Because if you carry alone too long, not only love will die, but the real person in you will also wither. A home is not kept by the shoulders of one, A marriage cannot live by the heart of one side. If you have gone half the long road with silent effort, then it is time for the other to step forward with you. And if they do not want to, or are not mature enough to share with you, then you putting down the burden is not selfishness, but the final act of mindfulness to protect the bright part still in yourself. The fifth pain, wanting to part but unable to cut off. She once wrote divorce papers 3 times. The first time was when she discovered he was unfaithful. The second time was when he hit her in a drunken rage. And the third time was when she realized, in his eyes, she had become nothing more than a shadow. But all 3 times, she tore up the papers, not because he held her back, but because she herself could not cut it off. She said, "I no longer love you as before, but I also cannot leave. Each time I think of not living together anymore, I feel empty, deeply hurt. Even though I know staying is suffering, is despair, but stepping out, I feel as if my soul has been taken away." Oh, she did not cry when speaking. Her eyes were dry, but in her voice was a whole sky of brokenness, patchwork, and entrapment without escape. There are people deep inside who have left each other long ago, but because of a child, a house, a New Year holiday, a few words of gossip, or even because of the fear of loneliness, they still stay, living like 2 strangers in a marriage frame already faded. And then, that suffering is no longer big clashes, but silent gnawing, stretching, until hearts harden. According to the Buddha's teaching, when a relationship makes you suffer but you still cannot leave, that is no longer love. That is karmic fate. And karmic fate cannot be cut off by ordinary will. Karma is what you must cleanse, must repay, must resolve, by deep mindfulness from within. Otherwise, you will leave, but still carry that pain into the next relationship. You will repeat the old tragedy, only with another person, in another form, but with the same heartache. That is why there are those who divorce, but cannot forget the old one. There are those who marry someone new, but their heart still turns to the past. There are those who, even though they have gone far, still dream every night of old wounds. Not because they love the old one, but because karma has not ended. And when karma is not seen through and let go of rightly, it will bind your soul forever. The Buddha does not teach us to stay in suffering, but he teaches, before letting go of a person, let go of resentment. Because if you leave in anger, in blame, in unrest, then you are not liberated. You only carry that karma into another cycle, and you will meet someone who brings the same kind of suffering, so you will relearn the lesson you once avoided. Some think, I must wait until I no longer love to let go. But the truth is, there are some people you will love all your life, but still must leave, because that is the only way to keep the light in you. There are relationships not meant to end in a sigh, but to be liberated by one mindful decision. So if you are in the state, cannot live peacefully if staying, but cannot be at ease if leaving, then stop. Do not rush to choose. Do not rush to act. Return to listen to yourself. Ask, am I staying out of fear of loneliness, or because I truly want to rebuild from the start? Am I leaving out of despair, or because I have matured enough to end an old karma? Am I trying to hold, or trying not to be the one who failed? Do not force yourself to have the answer now. Do not force yourself to be strong in one day. Give yourself time, not to torment, but to wash away illusions inside. Practice right within the relationship that hurts you, because that is the greatest practice hall of your life. The Buddha teaches, the one who leaves in mindfulness is the one who has finished paying a spiritual debt. If you are still unsettled, return to reflection. If you are still suffering, return to practicing love for yourself. And when your heart is truly at peace, you will know whether to stay or to go. Then, whatever action you choose is liberation, no longer running away, no longer blaming, but a choice in the light. She said, in the end, she did leave, but not in anger. It was after a season of retreat, where she went to the temple, recited sutras, meditated each morning, and wrote down every little thing she had gone through in marriage. She did not tear the papers again, but this time, she needed no tears. She only wrote one more line. I forgive everything, not because you deserve it, but because I want my heart to be at peace. Not everyone has the courage to let go. But if you have gone through the 4 pains before, have tried, have forgiven, have carried, have hoped, and now there is only emptiness, then your inability to let go may be the reminder. Karma is at its end, only waiting for you to awaken to let go rightly. Letting go is not forgetting. Letting go is accepting that there are people who come only to teach us to love ourselves again, then leave. Letting go is not weakness. Letting go is the final courage of a soul that has gone full circle of karma and wants to live the next life in light. After all, when going through each pain, from coldness, not being recognized, forgiving without change, carrying alone to the end, and even wanting to leave but unable to cut off, we suddenly realize marriage is not only the companionship of 2 people, but is a journey of opening the soul through each slice of karmic fate. Because if not for those pains, you would never stop to look inside. If the other person were always kind, always perfect, always loving you rightly, you would always live outside yourself, never knowing. There is a very deep part inside you that is still wounded, still attached, still expecting, and also thanks to the painful turns in marriage, you have the chance to see that. 1. Coldness like strangers is for you to learn to return inside. No one wants to live beside someone once passionate, now cold, as if you no longer exist. But it is precisely when that gaze disappears, when small caring gestures vanish, when the call darling also dissolves into emptiness, that you are forced to ask, who am I in this relationship? If they no longer see me, am I still seeing myself? And in that emptiness, perhaps, is the first soil where you plant a seed to learn to love yourself again without living on light from another. 2. No matter how much effort, still unrecognized, is for you to stop living for recognition. The greatest wound is not being forgotten, but being treated as obvious, even when you have given all. But that very pain will make you stop and ask, do I live for love, or do I live to be praised? Perhaps a whole lifetime we chase after others' eyes, forgetting, as long as we look at ourselves with kindness, then even if the whole world turns away, we still have a home to return to. 3. Forgiving without change is for you to distinguish between compassion and cutting off. Forgiveness is virtue, but forgiveness in the wrong way is imprisoning yourself in a cycle of hurt. Each time you overlook someone who does not correct themselves, you carve another crack into your heart, until that heart has no shape left. The Buddha teaches, letting go at the right time is wisdom, and sometimes the most compassionate thing is not to keep the other, but to stop tolerating the same wrongs repeated too many times. 4. Carrying alone is for you to realize no one is born to bear the whole life of another. Love is not carrying. Love is sharing, is doing together, is breathing together. But if you keep holding everything and think that is love, then you are teaching the other to be lazy in love, irresponsible, and accustomed to living in your sacrifice. Carrying too long will tire you to the point you no longer recognize yourself. Remember, you do not need to carry, you need companionship. 5. Wanting to leave but unable to cut off is for you to learn to let go without resentment. A person once in your whole world suddenly one day becomes a stranger, yet your heart still twists each time you think of them. That is not love, but karma. It is unfinished matters. It is knots not yet untied. And you cannot run from it with a divorce paper. You can only let it go when your heart has solved it. No more resentment, no more suffering, no more attachment. Each pain, if without mindfulness, will lead us to destruction. But if seeing deeply, each pain is precisely the door opening a new level of maturity in the soul. People often think, marriage is where to be loved. But the Buddha teaches, marriage is where to learn to love with a compassionate heart, without expectation, without demand, without imposition. Such love does not die with years, but only transforms into another form of light. Quiet, steady, understanding, no longer possessing, but always present in each other's hearts. If you have gone to the end of these 5 pains, please do not think you are unfortunate. Smile, because you are standing before the threshold of liberation, not to leave the other, but to leave wrong ways of loving, dependent living, and attachments of an unripe soul. You do not need to end marriage to be free. You only need to end torment, expectation, resentment, and self-condemnation to be free within your own heart. Then, whether staying or leaving, you will feel light as clouds, clear as wind. No more resentment, no more hatred, no more must love. Only a kind heart and the light of understanding. If you have ever gone through coldness, sacrifice, forgiveness, carrying, wanting to separate, then please do not call it misfortune, but call it a journey of healing the soul through the karmic fate of husband and wife. Not everyone has enough courage to walk it all, but if you have listened until here, perhaps you are one of the few standing at the threshold of dissolving the deepest karma of your life. And if you are brave enough to look back, to understand, to forgive rightly, to love yourself again, then you do not need anyone to prove happiness for you. You will become your own source of light, and also the light for those still lost in the darkness around you. Dear friend, if you have listened until here, perhaps you are not only going through a video, but also walking past a part of your own life. Perhaps you have once tried to love, tried to endure, tried to hold on, tried to keep. Perhaps you have once written divorce papers, then torn them, then written again, then torn again. No one steps into marriage wanting to learn endurance, but no one finishes a human life without having to relearn love, not with a heart full of expectation, but with a soul that has learned to let go of resentment. If you have ever fallen into one of those 5 pains, please do not hesitate to leave a sharing, not to complain, but to remind each other, in this world full of breakage, there are still people choosing to live with a kind heart, even though once it bled. Perhaps someone may read what you write and find the courage not to let go at the weakest time of their heart. Are you going through a coldness? Are you forgiving until your heart is empty? Are you carrying a whole marriage on your shoulders without anyone knowing? Or are you standing before the threshold of separation but cannot cut off? Leave a line of feeling in the comments. It need not be long, only true. We are here, not to heal each other, but to remind each other, no one is alone in this journey of karma dissolving. And if you still thirst to understand more deeply, why are there couples, even after all suffering, still unable to let go of each other? Why the more love, the more suffering? And how to make love no longer a karmic chain, but become a path of practice, dissolution, and enlightenment. In the next video, we will step into a big question. Is it true that the one who makes you suffer most in life is the one you owe the deepest debt from many past lives? Do not leave yet, because, perhaps, in that video, you will for the first time understand suffering is not the end, but a comma, opening a journey of liberation if you continue with a bright heart, a farewell gentle as the evening breeze. If you are suffering in the very relationship you once believed was destiny, pause a little to listen to the call from within. Perhaps you do not need to let go of that person, but only need to let go of the karma binding between you two. Perhaps you do not need anyone to love you rightly, but need yourself to love yourself deeply enough. Because when your heart is bright enough, love will no longer be demanded, but become a quiet light, warming you each day. Subscribe to the Flowers of the Way channel, so each week you may have a pause, a reminder, a word of healing, and a path not to get lost again in the pain that once seemed without exit.